Thank you. So I'm excited to be here to talk to all of you about supporting learners from groups that are underrepresented in science and medicine. The presentation objectives today are to describe common stresses and barriers for biomedical science learners, particularly those from underrepresented groups. We'll define the hidden curriculum and identify 1 to 2 strategies to support learners from diverse backgrounds. Okay. So as I said, as Jemmy just told all of you, I've been here at Hopkins since 2015, but in 2021, I became the Assistant Dean for Graduate Biomedical Education and Graduate Student Diversity here in the School of Medicine. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to come back to all of you, my family of origin, to tell you a little bit more about what I've been doing in the Dean's office. So we are going to discuss why student diversity matters. We'll talk about what the hidden curriculum is, and we'll review some strategies to support student well-being. So first, we'll talk about why student diversity matters. So who is underrepresented in science and medicine? So there's research suggesting that there is significant underrepresentation and barriers to accessing science careers for the following groups that are on the screen. And these are groups that the NIH defines as underrepresented in science and medicine. So this includes underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, including those who identify as American Indian or Alaskan Native, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, or Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. This also includes persons with disabilities, and it includes individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds, which includes those who've experienced homelessness, who've been placed in foster care, who have been eligible for free or reduced lunch, have been eligible for a Pell Grant, or had received support from the Women's, Infants, and Children's Program, did not have a parent or caregiver who had completed a bachelor's degree, or have grown up in a rural area. And the NIH also notes that women who have one of these other 3 identities are also significantly underrepresented. So noting that there's some intersectionality there, that being a woman and having one of these other identities might make you even less part of a group that's even less well represented in science and medicine. So what contributes to this underrepresentation in science and medicine? So there is a history of and current discrimination that impacts underrepresentation. We'll talk a little bit more about in just a second. And there's also a historical and current unequal distribution of resources by race, ethnicity, gender, and disability. And this happens all across the sort of developmental learning spectrum. So for example, in K through 12 schools, 8% of students in well-funded K through 12 schools were Black or Latino, compared to there being over 20% of students from underfunded, and 20% of students from underfunded and poor performing schools were Black or Latino. So there's an overrepresentation of folks from minoritized racial and ethnic groups in K through 12 schools that are underfunded and poor performing, which can impact people's access to science careers. There are other things that get in the way, like affordability of education. So these things, among others, contribute to what people have described as the leaky STEM pipeline. So the leaky pipeline is a metaphor for the decreasing diversity in biomedical science tracks over the course of the educational or vocational timeline. So it's this idea that despite STEM interests by groups that are currently underrepresented in STEM, people with marginalized identities are diverted to other career paths. So in addition to unequal distribution of resources that I described just before, people from underrepresented groups in science and medicine also experience things like wage gaps. They're more likely to experience discrimination, feelings of isolation, and feeling undervalued in the workplace. So among women in STEM jobs, they're much more likely than their male counterparts to have reported experiencing gender discrimination at work. They also are more likely to note that their gender has made it harder to succeed at work, and are more likely to report sexual harassment in the workplace. For people, so it is also the case that people of color are more likely to report having experienced discrimination in the workplace in STEM fields, with Black STEM workers being the most likely to say that they've experienced discrimination, at work due to their race, and this being more prevalent in STEM jobs among Black workers than in non-STEM jobs. It is also the case that among people of color, people of color are more likely to say that their race or ethnicity has made job success harder compared to their white counterparts in both STEM and non-STEM jobs. Black people who have STEM jobs are more likely to report experiencing racial and ethnic discrimination. And one thing that's important to note, that 1 in 5 of STEM workers who say that their race has hampered their success in their career has indicated that that was due to how they were treated by their coworkers. So the barrier to their success was perceived to be on the part of being treated differently or unfairly by their coworkers. Among students, so graduate students in STEM who have underrepresented identities, they report feeling alienated, they report having to work harder to receive recognition, and working under heightened scrutiny. And among underrepresented faculty and students in academia, they report, compared to white faculty and students, a lower sense of belonging, greater perception of discrimination. They also support suboptimal mentoring, and about half of underrepresented faculty and students in academia, and the studies that I've cited here, report having considered leaving academia, and a third report having experienced racism in their program or field. So all of these kinds of factors contribute to this leaky pipeline where diversity of the STEM workforce decreases across, again, the professional timeline. So why does it matter? I mean, I think there are probably some obvious answers to that, but I want to tell you maybe what perhaps might be some of the less obvious answers to why STEM diversity matters. So there's lots of research that suggests that scientists and clinicians from underrepresented groups demonstrate greater awareness of and investment in ameliorating health disparities. So increasing diversity in STEM will likely better address health disparities. And there's also research suggesting that having more diverse workplaces, a more diverse STEM workforce, biomedical workforce, increases creativity and innovation. So it's good for all of us. So with these things in mind, with the knowledge that there are many groups that are underrepresented in science and medicine, and that there are many benefits to having a diverse science and medicine workforce, there have been numerous calls to improve diversity and inclusion efforts in colleges and universities, including from the National Academies of Science and Engineering, from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and from the Association of American Colleges and Universities, and of course from NIH, as I mentioned earlier. So here at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, we've certainly taken up that call. In the graduate school here in the School of Medicine, it is our mission to promote a diverse, inclusive, and exceptional biomedical workforce. And we have overarching goals in the areas of professional development, well-being and retention, and pathways and recruitment. So a couple of programs that I would like to call out in detail today, but just want to briefly give you an overview of some of the things that we do. So in the pathways area, we have several pathway programs that are designed to facilitate access to biomedical science careers, to biomedical science Ph.D. programs, and then biomedical science careers, with a particular focus on folks who have currently underrepresented identities. We also, on the recruitment side, participate in conferences and career fairs that engage scholars that have identities that are underrepresented in science. We have an application fee waiver program to reduce application barriers. In the professional development space, we do lots of different things to promote and celebrate the accomplishments of scholars from underrepresented groups, and to promote inclusive excellence, and to promote connectedness. I'll be telling you more about one of those programs in particular in just a second. And I also provide in my role, I serve as a mentor and advocate for our students. So any students who are looking for just some additional support can come to me. I can also advocate for them with their program directors or with the PIs whose labs they're in and things like that. So I'm able to provide some one-on-one support in that way. And in the well-being and retention area, we have, in addition to the sort of one-on-one support that I've offered, we have an emergency fund that students can apply to 2 times a year if they're experiencing a financial crisis and receive funds from our office to help ameliorate the financial emergency that they're experiencing. And we also this year or last year for the first time started an incoming student webinar. We noticed in our emergency fund applications that a lot of students were experiencing financial crisis because they were having trouble finding adequate housing or other things that we wanted to sort of intervene on early or prevent in the first place. So we started an incoming graduate student webinar that takes place in the spring to share with students information about sort of common places that students live, how to find roommates, making sure that they understand their health insurance, making sure that students, international students, know what all the resources are available to them, et cetera. So that's a very brief overview. I wish I had lots of time to talk in great detail about a lot of the things that we do, but there's 2 things in particular that I want to focus on today. But before we get into the details of those programs, I want to talk a little bit about what the hidden curriculum is. So this term, the hidden curriculum, it's a concept that's been around since the 60s. It was coined by Philip Jackson with the notion that education is a socialization process. So we're not just imparting information, we're socializing learners to a particular career path and what those expectations are, that there are implicit beliefs, attitudes, norms, and behaviors associated with those career paths. It was more recently that it was applied or that it was noted that access to this sort of hidden curriculum is inequitably distributed. So there are lots of rules and behavioral schema that are necessary to be successful in graduate school, but they're not explicitly taught. So there are things that are taught explicitly, things like data collection. We teach students obviously about data analysis. They're given guidance on their thesis or dissertation work. We teach writing and presentation skills, but there are lots of other skills that are really important to be successful in graduate school that students are either just expected to know or just sort of absorb without being explicitly taught. And that can be things like how to build, how to identify and develop mentoring relationships, how to build a support network, how to navigate mental health, and financial literacy, among other things. So as I mentioned, folks who have identities that are underrepresented in science and medicine have decreased access to this hidden curriculum, which can contribute to poor access for learners from underrepresented groups, including having fewer publications, a decreased sense of belonging, poor mental health, and a decreased likelihood to pursue an academic position compared to white students. Okay, so now I've outlined the problem. So what can we do about it? So there are 2 programs that have been started in the School of Medicine that I'd like to describe to you. The first is the Hidden Curriculum Symposium. So the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine Hidden Curriculum Symposium is a student-led initiative. So there was I wanted to do something very similar to this when I started my position as assistant dean of 2.5 years ago. A group of students came to me about 2 years ago, maybe 1.5 years ago, with this idea to have a program to demystify the first year of graduate school, with the goal of making what is implicit about the hidden curriculum explicit, with a focus on academic readiness, conflict resolution, mental wellness, financial literacy, and support network development. And so a group of graduate students here in the School of Medicine. I've been very lucky to be able to serve in an advisory role as they've developed this event, but it is student-led, and they've done a great job with it. So the symposium focuses on these 4 topic areas and then provides opportunities for networking. So the first area is academic success, which includes a discussion about coursework preparation, optimizing lab rotation. So students in our graduate school typically rotate in 3 to 4 labs before they settle on which lab they're going to complete their thesis or dissertation work in. This covers how to select a thesis advisor, what the academic expectations are, its tools for building study groups, how to balance lab work and classes, and different university resources that might be helpful to support academic success. The mental health segment covered how to recognize stressors and signs of mental health issues and access university resources. It also included a values and goals identification exercise, as well as skills for managing stress, tools for mental wellness and resources to navigate future mental health challenges. In the conflict resolution section, it discussed how to resolve conflicts, managing potential consequences, and includes case study review for to generate discussion about how to resolve conflicts. And then in financial literacy, they discuss management of personal finances, how to secure funding through grants and fellowships, understanding federal and state tax burdens and responsibilities, and navigating the complexities of earning additional income. So for the first iteration of this event, which was in the fall of 2022, they invited all School of Medicine students from our first-year School of Medicine students from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. As I described, this was a student-led event. So students got together, so our more senior students got together just with some guidance, but really led by the students, got together and determined what were the important topics to cover and how best to cover them. They also developed a survey to give to participants, folks who participated in the Hidden Curriculum Symposium before participation, immediately following participation, and at the end of the year for quality improvement purposes. So here's what the event looked like. So the first day was this Hidden Curriculum boot camp and a social event. So the boot camp included all of the topics that I described in an earlier slide. So the sessions covered academic success, conflict resolution, mental health, and financial literacy. The students had dinner and there was a social event. So this was sort of the first part of the sort of networking and building social support goal of the event. And then the next day was a Hidden Curriculum networking brunch. There's food and drinks and games and opportunities to network with not only other graduate students, but postdocs, faculty, and administrators. They also presented all of the folks who participated, all of the first years who participated in the Hidden Curriculum Symposium with backpacks, with school supplies, and there were raffles and giveaways. There was a raffle for an iPad, for instance. This is a picture from the first iteration of the Hidden Curriculum Symposium from that networking brunch that happened on day 2, which I was very excited to get to be present for. So let's see. In addition to being very fortunate to getting to advise our wonderful students on the development of this event, I also was able to work with them on a manuscript that outlined the event and outcomes. And the manuscript is currently under review at the revise and resubmit stage after a very promising initial review. So I'm hopeful that that will get published in the very near future. But want to share with you a little bit on the outcomes from this first iteration of the Hidden Curriculum Symposium. So there were 59 incoming Ph.D. students who were contacted, who were invited to participate in this first iteration of the Hidden Curriculum Symposium. 12 first-year students from 5 different graduate programs in Johns Hopkins Medicine attended the 2-day Hidden Curriculum event. There were initially 13 who had indicated interest, but only 12 actually participated in the event. So the subsequent analyses focused on those 12. You can see they were on average about 23 years old. The majority of the participants were Black or African American, followed by Latinx or Hispanic. And there was one student who was an Indigenous or Native American. There was an even split between students who identified as male and female. And a slight majority of participants had a bachelor's degree. About a third didn't report, and one student had a master's degree before participating in the event. And most students also had attended a historically Black college or university or other minority serving institution before enrolling in Hopkins. So the surveys that were given that the participants completed, again, were given before the event, immediately following the event, and at the end of the academic year, and they were designed to assess students' comfort and readiness to handle each of these sort of 5 areas. So academic success, mental health, conflict resolution, financial literacy, and support networks. Because there were lots of questions in the survey, we did create scores, scale scores that were the mean of items that assessed the hidden curriculum participants' skills and or comfort with each of those focus areas. And these scales demonstrated good to excellent internal consistency. So we stuck with the scales for analysis. And we conducted repeaters, measures, and novas, and we found that, so here, this first column of box plots are the pre-scores. This middle column of box plots are the post scores, and then this final column are the end of year scores. And so blue is the academic success score. This pink color is for mental health. Green is conflict resolution. Purple is financial literacy, and orange is support networks. So what we found was that there were significant differences in summary scores pre to post across all of the areas assessed. So all students reported essentially feeling more comfortable, feeling more skilled in the area, more prepared in the areas of academic success, mental health, conflict resolution, financial literacy, and support networks. They felt better about all of those things immediately following the hidden curriculum event than they did before it. And importantly, there were no significant differences between post scores and end of year scores, which means that these benefits were sustained over the course of the academic year. So at the end of the participants' first year, they reported feeling as confident about all of the things that they had learned about in the Hidden Curriculum Symposium, just as confident about them as they did immediately following the event. So this provides preliminary evidence. Again, there was an N of 12, so it was a small sample. So this was sort of a pilot study. So the preliminary evidence that the Hidden Curriculum Symposium improved student perceived readiness across each subject area. And again, this improvement was sustained through the end of the first year. So we can make the implicit explicit in a way that was meaningful to our first year students. And I also want to note, well, it's great to see the numbers. I also heard from students directly who participated how helpful it was, and it was honestly, as a participant, at least in the second day, so the networking event, and as a participant who helped with planning the event, it was also just a lot of fun. It was a very fun experience, and there were provided really great opportunities for our students to network with each other and feel better prepared going into graduate school. So as far as next steps for this particular program, the symposium took place again this past fall. So again, the data that I shared with you was from the 2022 iteration of the Hidden Curriculum Symposium. The 2023 Hidden Curriculum Symposium saw an increase in the number of students who participated from 12 to 34. There was also an increase in the number of folks who attended the networking event that was on day 2. So that increased from about 50 to 100. And the reasons for this increase included focusing on early and consistent advertising. So having done it once, we could start very early, even during recruitment. So when I would give recruitment talks, I could talk about the Hidden Curriculum Symposium as something for prospective students to look forward to happening here. So there was a much earlier advertising and awareness of the event, and then also have the benefit of the prior first years to current second years who participate in the event, being able to share, sort of provide testimonials and be able to share with incoming first year students what they found helpful about the event. Other things that we have discussed are including additional sessions. So again, there was just this one event, this one 2-day event that happened in the fall, sort of between orientation and when classes started, But we have discussed having booster sessions that sort of cover some of the material again or in a different way that was covered during the initial event, or expanding to other topic areas or touching on things in different ways later in the first year. So we talked about including like a speed networking, speed mentoring event later on in the first year for folks who participated in the initial hidden curriculum symposium. And there's generally a lot of enthusiasm for this event across the School of Medicine. So it's been a really great experience overall. And the wonderful students who developed this program have also developed a conceptual guide to help others who would like to do something similar in their own programs. That includes some things to consider when recruiting participants, how to think about getting institutional support for the event, things to consider to design the curriculum, including making sure it's tailored to an individual university's or program's needs, making sure that there are clear strategies for preparing students for success, what resources students can access, and when they face adversity, and making sure, again, the information is pertinent and useful. Guidance on implementing the curriculum, including our students felt very strongly that it should be student-led and student-centered, and use interactive learning, so including panels and case studies and different activities to generate engagement, and ensuring impact, so making sure that the content is culturally inclusive, and that it focuses on creating an open, encouraging, and supportive environment. And then for program evaluation and improvement, so noting that what's needed, or what the sort of like hidden curriculum is, what those implicit skills that are necessary to be successful in graduate school might change over time. So the content of the hidden curriculum should adjust, and that it's important to get feedback on the program and use that to inform future iterations of the hidden curriculum symposium. Okay. So the other program that I wanted to discuss with you are wellness seminars. So we just this academic year, us being in the Office of Graduate Biomedical Education, started a School of Medicine Graduate Wellness seminar series with the focus or goals of fostering a sense of support and belonging, promoting wellness skill building among all School of Medicine graduate students, contributing to a more robust, better connected mental health support network with a focus on School of Medicine students, and connecting students with other helpful resources on campus. So again, the hidden curriculum event that I described before was particularly focused on first years, and it had a mental health component of it. But this event is really wellness and mental health focused. And the reason that this came about is because in my work with students over the year before we implemented this program, I was finding that students were often unclear on resources that were available to them to promote mental health and well-being. A lot of the mental health resources that are available are focused on the Homewood campus, and it was often unclear to School of Medicine students whether the information presented in those the information available to those resources would be relevant to them or helpful to them. I mean, it was also sometimes challenging for them to get to those things. And also, I just generally sensed from feedback that I was hearing from students that they felt like they could benefit from having more support for wellness skill building. So the goal of the series was to cover some mental health skills and promote healthy social functioning and maintaining healthy habits. And I'll talk a little bit more about the content of each seminar in just a moment. All School of Medicine students were invited to participate, and students could decide to attend all of the seminars or only one. So it was up to them. They could attend none, they could attend all, or only one. And the folks who presented the topics were all people who specialized in whatever the particular topic was. So it included folks from the Office of Graduate Biomedical Education, which would be me in this case, the Office from the Professional Development and Careers Office, and presenters from Student Health and Wellbeing, or the Johns Hopkins Student Assistance Program, which is now called the consultation services. So you might ask, why take a particular focus on mental health, besides that being my area of expertise? Grad school is really stressful. I mean, academia is stressful. It's a stressful environment for lots of folks. I mentioned some particular stressors to people who have underrepresented identities earlier in the talk. And for a lot of our students who are generally between the ages of about 21 and 35, they're having lots of new and challenging experiences. There might be things that they're having to deal with for the first time. So a lot of our students are coming directly from undergrad. They might not only be experiencing this very stressful sort of academic environment, but they also might be dealing with things like how to pay rent for the first time, how to manage a budget. They might be making decisions about long-term relationships, maybe deciding whether or not to have children. They might have moved away from their families for the first time in their lives. And all of these things contribute to can contribute to a challenging and stressful time for graduate students. And so we want to do what we can to ameliorate some of that stress. The other thing is that given the ages of our students, the age of our student body overlaps with common ages of onset for a number of mental health problems, including anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and substance use disorders. And about 75% of all mental health disorders start by the mid-20s. So want to do what we can to protect the mental health of our students. So I will say that the program that we developed was not designed to treat mental illness. It was designed to promote mental wellness. So we did not have a particular sort of mental health problem as a focus, but just included various components that were designed to promote wellness among our graduate students. So each of the seminars was about 45 to 60 minutes long. They were all meant to be interactive, so include a didactic component as well as an activity or opportunity for practice in the seminar. The seminars are all in person, and that sort of initial didactic component is recorded and made available to students who requested after the seminar. And they occur monthly during the academic year. So this is really tiny and maybe hard to see, but I will walk you through it. But this was sort of the schedule of events this year. So we started with an introduction to the series and an overview of self-care and coping, how to develop self-care skills, how to develop coping skills, how self-care and coping are similar and what's different. And I led that one. We had a seminar on imposterization, or how to recognize imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon, and how to cope with it. That was led by one of our Johns Hopkins Student Assistance Program therapist, Jennifer West. There was a mindfulness practice seminar that was led by our very own Netta Gould in December. There was a seminar focused on time management, so how to manage multiple competing academic and social goals, strategies to use for time management, led by folks who lead the Professional Development and Careers Office for our graduate students, Drs. DeLuzin and Neely. And we most recently had a seminar on maintaining healthy relationships as a graduate student, which was led by somebody from the Homewood University Health and Wellness Office, Maggie Lewis, who's a social worker. And coming up, we'll have a seminar on nutrition, so including tips from a dietitian on fostering healthy eating habits and meal planning on a graduate student budget. We're going to have just sort of like a wellness break on April 3rd. There'll be lots of students who are taking exams and things like that around that time. So we decided we'll just have sort of like a snack break and some sort of stress reducing exercises for folks to complete in that time. And then our final seminar will be tips from a physical therapist. So how to keep your body healthy while you might be spending a lot of time sitting or standing at a computer or at a bench in the lab. So again, so far we've the seminars from October to February have taken place. Of course, there are still 2 more or 3 more remaining in the academic year. Each seminar has been attended by about 10 to 16 students, with an estimated sort of range total of students who have participated in at least one seminar of 50 to 60. So again, students weren't required to attend all of the seminars. They could choose the ones that they thought were the most relevant to them. So I think there's maybe been one student who's attended every single one so far, but otherwise there's been sort of a different mix of students at each of the seminars that have taken place so far. And notably, this particular program was not exclusively focused on folks from underrepresented groups. There definitely a solid representation of among the people who have participated of folks from underrepresented groups. About 80% of the participants have or attendees have been women. 40% have identified with an underrepresented racial or ethnic group. 20% were first gen, so again, meaning that they don't have a primary caregiver who had completed a bachelor's degree, and about 40% were people with disabilities. So we gave, after each seminar that's taken place so far, all the participants could volunteer to participate in a feedback survey. So we have some feedback on all of our seminars. So the questions, there were many other questions, but I could not fit them all on the slide, so I'm highlighting the most relevant ones here. So the questions included things are the items on the questionnaire included things like, this workshop was helpful, I learned a new skill or strengthened a skill that I already had. The content was easy to understand. I enjoyed this workshop. I'm using the skills I learned will improve my mental health. The workshop was tailored to the needs of graduate students, which, as you may recall, was one of the primary goals of the event, was to be tailored specifically to the needs of school of medicine graduate students. I will continue to use the skills that I learned in this workshop. I would recommend this workshop to a friend or colleague. So all of the response options for these items were on a scale of 1 to 7, with 1 being very much disagree and 7 being very much agree. So overall, you can see that the series has been well received and appreciated. And I will note that, so if you can't tell, so the mindfulness and time management seminars were received the highest rating. So thanks again to Dr. Gould for providing such an engaging and exciting seminar for our students. Again, they very much enjoyed it, and it was the only that was the only topic that were on the feedback surveys in the write-in section. Students said, hey, we'd really like to see more of this, more mindfulness, please. So that was really great and helpful for them. The one place where I definitely want to take another look is on the Fostering Healthy Relationships seminar, which you can see received sort of middle of the scale ratings. And on furthering investigation, looking at the surveys, it seems that the seminar was one that had been, the way that it was delivered was one that had very similar to what had been given to undergrads. And so students were feeling like the topics that were covered were things that they had already covered before in undergrad. And so we're looking for a different level of content, a different kind of content. And so we'll definitely keep that in mind when we do this program again next year. But based on the feedback that we're seeing so far and my conversations with students I've had so far, I do believe we will be doing this workshop again. It might just look a little bit different from how it has looked this year. So the next steps that I see for this seminar are to get focus groups together from students who participated in at least one of the seminars, to hear more from them about what they found helpful, if there are changes to the format that they would like to see, if there are changes to topics that they would like to see. One thing that I'm hearing from folks already is that they would like to see more content focused on sleep hygiene. And so then we'll take the feedback from these focus groups and use it to modify the workshops for next year. So we've talked some about, again, these 2 programs, the Hidden Curriculum Symposium and the Graduate Student Wellness Seminar, that have been developed to support student well-being and particularly well-being of students from underrepresented groups. I want to also just make sure I share a few additional sort of final thoughts about how to support learners with underrepresented identities. So I think from the data that I've shared, from the background information that I've shared, it is clear that it's helpful and important to strengthen mentoring, networking, and other support opportunities for students from underrepresented groups. Students have noted challenges with mentoring as being a particular barrier to success. In my role as assistant dean, as I mentioned before, I do offer I do serve as an additional mentor to any student who needs it or who would find it helpful. But I think there's definitely more work that can be done in that area. It is also clearly important to continue to foster STEM pathways or foster career opportunities in science and medicine for folks from underrepresented groups starting early, and the barriers start showing up early. And so fostering the STEM pathway also needs to happen early on in the educational pathway, starting in K through 12, but continuing through graduate school and beyond. But also, I mean, I know this seems very, very simple, but listening, I think just listening is extremely important and perhaps undervalued. And I will tell you, a lot of the students that I've talked to who are looking for additional guidance or additional mentoring will say, nobody has really listened to me, just taking the time just to listen to what I'm experiencing, to listen to what I feel like I need to succeed here. And I think a lot of us who are on Zoom today are clinicians, and so have uniquely fostered skills and listening that we would certainly use in the clinical spaces. But want to be sure that we're also making sure we're using those really well-developed listening skills when we're working with learners as well. I think it's important to suspend assumptions and to approach all interactions with learners, with all learners, but particularly from those from underrepresented backgrounds, with curiosity. So respecting each individual as an expert on their own experiences. And also in those interactions with students, being mindful of your own bias and how they might impact, or all of us need to be mindful of our own bias and how they might impact our interactions with others, but particularly those who on the surface might seem different from us. And the last thing is that it's really important to understand that the responsibility to support diversity, equity, and inclusion lies not only with those from underrepresented groups, but from all of us. So at the current point in time, faculty from minoritized racial ethnic backgrounds, in some cases, women faculty, particularly in basic sciences, faculty with disabilities, faculty from those other disadvantaged background groups that the NIH noted, those are also underrepresented identities at the faculty level. So to better support all of our students from underrepresented identities, it really takes us all working together. So the things I'm hoping take away from today that is that increasing diversity in biomedical science could have a profound public health implications. Again, noting that folks from underrepresented groups are often more attuned to the needs of underrepresented groups to health disparities and are interested in focusing their research or clinical skills on improving well-being among people from with marginalized identities. And we can and should bring what is hidden to light. So the hidden curriculum does not have to remain as such. We can make sure that we're providing our learners with all of the information that they need to be successful in graduate school, whether it's around financial literacy, mental health, conflict resolution, or other sort of academic skills. It is our job as educators to make sure that our students have these sort of non-cognitive, non-academic skills that are needed to be successful and as learners and take them to the next steps in their career. But it's also clear that there's lots more work to do. And again, there's lots of things that are going on that I haven't had the time to mention today, but I'm happy to answer questions about them and talk more with anybody who's interested in hearing more about what we're doing here in the School of Medicine Graduate School. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge the tremendous efforts of the graduate students who led the Hidden Curriculum Symposium that I mentioned earlier, Michael Hopkins, Brittany Moore, and Jasmine Jeffrey, and many, many other students who were involved and helped to make that event a success, as well as the people that I work with, the collaborators that I have in the graduate school, including the Office of the Vice Dean for Education, the Office of Graduate Biomedical Education, as well as the School of Medicine Office for Diversity, Inclusion, and Health Equity. Thank you all for listening, and happy to answer any questions.
Great work, Andrea. A great presentation, and boy, I love that hidden curriculum. I think is such a fantastic idea, and I love the fact that you're writing it up so that people over the country can read about it, and that figure you showed about how people can think about implementing it in their own program seems like a really useful thing. It makes me think of the work of our neighbors at UMBC, who've done such a tremendous job at encouraging underrepresented minorities in STEM, and I know they've written up a number of papers talking about how they've approached that. I guess I wonder whether you've talked to them at all or read anything they've done.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I wasn't able to talk about in 45 minutes, but there's actually a fairly new office in the provost office for graduate student diversity and partnerships, with a focus on collaborating with HBCUs, with historically Black colleges and universities and other minorities serving institutions. And so they do a lot of work with UMBC as well as other HBCUs in Maryland and around the country. And so they have a number of diversity promoting programming for undergrads. Like they have a grad school fair that the School of Medicine participates in, and other folks from the other divisions in the university participate in. And so, yes, I know they've been doing a fantastic job promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, increasing grant funding and things like that at UMBC. So there are lots of good lessons to learn from them.
Thanks. Dr. DePaulo says, Andrea, thanks for your presentation and for your work. The Hidden Agenda Project clearly appears to be therapeutic as well as informative. Is this something derived? Is there something derived from this that could be useful and feasible for School of Medicine? I guess medical students, I guess Ray's getting at.
Yeah, so I think so. So I guess one thing that I didn't mention in when I was talking about next steps. So I've talked to the PhD students who have led the event, and I've talked some to folks in the OMSA, so the Office of Medical Student Affairs, about the utility of the content that's covered for medical students, medical school students. And there's general agreement that the content that's covered, with some modifications of, some things might not be as relevant for medical students, but for the most part, a lot of it would be relevant and potentially helpful to med school students. So we have talked about sort of expanding to inclusion for the med school.
Great, thanks. Dr. Redgrave says, thanks so much for this. Recruiting and retaining a diverse residency workforce remains an important goal for those of us in residency leadership. I was struck by the importance of fostering a sense of belonging and listening to trainees. Many thanks. I guess that's a comment more than a question.
Thanks.
Do you have a comment on the comment?
No, I agree. I think it's a point that I think a lot of times efforts in the DEI space are really focused on diversity, so increasing representation, but sort of really preventing the leaky pipeline is so much more than about increasing sort of baseline numbers. We want to be able to retain and engage people, and that includes making sure that we do foster a sense of belonging and that we're listening and making sure that we're supporting all of our students in the way they need to be supported.
Thank you. Yes, and I happen to think that then they're more likely to join faculty and then more likely to be able to help with future recruitment efforts.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that.
Yeah. Good point. Karen Diana Soda says, Andrea, thanks for this important work. Are there any programs or strategies you've seen residency programs and/or academic departments implement to both support and also recruit faculty trainees who are underrepresented in medicine?
Yeah, so there's a fairly new, I think, within the last year role that Marquita Genus has. So she's on faculty in pediatrics, but her role is to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in graduate medical education and also for postdocs. And so she has been hosting several sort of networking lunches, particularly for residents and fellows, and sort of covering topics that, I guess in a lot of ways similar to the hidden curriculum, but covering topics that are designed to support the success of residents with underrepresented identities. So I think she's done 3 or 4 of these, and typically faculty are included in those sort of, I think, their lunchtime seminars to help also foster networking opportunities.
Great, thanks. Marco Grotto says, the importance of your work at Hopkins. Kudos, Andrea. The importance of your work at Hopkins cannot be overestimated. How do we expand your ideas, programs to cover students, pre-med, UIS, UIM, more broadly, would SNMA and other groups coordinate with your office? Would more institutional administrative support help? Any thoughts specific to psychiatry residents and fellows?
Yeah, I think more institutional administrative support is always helpful. But yes, I mean, so there's also a DI dean for the med school, Dr. Nathan Irvin, who works closely with SNMA, and we have through the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Health Equity, we have a Student Diversity Council, which includes students who are leaders in affinity groups, whether it's with medical school students or MD students or Master's or PhD students. So I'm serving an advisory role to that committee. Dr. Urban is also there, and then there's also administrative support from the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Health Equity. So, and that way we do collaborate quite a bit, and sort of our students get the opportunity to collaborate across degree type and designing programming to support to promote inclusive excellence here in the School of Medicine. As far as specific thoughts about psychiatry residents and fellows, I mean, again, I think making sure that we're doing everything we can to promote a sense of inclusion and belonging. I think similar to what Dr. Genus is doing, having sort of lunches and sort of networking opportunities for our learners from underrepresented groups can be a really helpful place to start.
That's a great point. Thanks. Dr. Campos says, thank you for this thoughtful work and the opportunity to hear about it. You're clearly creating a warm and welcoming space that's truly inclusive and have developed a model that seems like it would benefit just about every graduate student out there. Thanks again.
Thanks, John.
Amber Davis says, Dr. Young, thank you. Do you have any data on the population specific to having disabilities? Is there a plan for addressing intersectionality specific to race and disability? If so, and also intersectionality related to being Black and female?
Yeah, so very good point. So I noted earlier that being a woman and having one of the other identities that so the NIH notes being a woman and being also from an underrepresented racial ethnic group, having a disability or having one of the other identities that were listed, it might mean that your pathway to science is a particularly challenging one. And so if there have not been, well, so I do think, so there have been some sort of student-led initiatives that are sort of more focused on intersectionality. So maybe Black folks with disabilities in science, or Black women who are in one of our PhD programs. At the institutional level, has there been programming that's specifically addressing intersectionality? I think, so if you think about the wellness seminars, so in some of them where it's relevant, intersectionality might come up. So there might be a note that about particular challenges that might be particularly salient for people with particular identities or with intersectional identities and how to address those. There has not been like a program other than sort of the support sort of networking things that I mentioned before that's specifically designed for intersectionality. I think it's important, absolutely, and try to make sure that we discuss intersectionality in very sensitive and relevant ways when appropriate.
Thank you. James Delory says, I really appreciated your developing the hidden curriculum program to explicitly teach the otherwise untaught but expected skills. Another frequently discussed aspect of the hidden curriculum is the unscripted negative experiences in educational settings like discrimination in the lab or in clerkships. What can educational institutions do to eliminate this aspect of the hidden curriculum?
Yeah, I mean, so that has to, I think, it'd be intervened on at a very different level. So I think that comes at an institutional level, making sure that discrimination is, making it clear that discrimination will not be tolerated, making sure that people are sort of educated on what their biases are and how to overcome them. And there have been efforts through the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Health Equity to make sure that everyone who has a supervisory role in the School of Medicine completes anti-bias training. But ultimately, we have to do everything that we can to protect our students. We have to make sure that there are safe places for our students to come to if they have been experiencing any sort of learner mistreatment or discrimination, and make sure that we act swiftly and effectively to prevent it from happening again.
Great, thanks. And last question from Anita Bajaj. Great job. Any comment on the Supreme Court decision changing affirmative action and how it impacts medical education? I know AAMC had some initiatives, I think.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, that's a very salient, timely question. So I think that it's hard to know how exactly that decision, what impact it will have on admissions and retention. I suppose time will tell. So we'll see what our recruitment numbers look like this year. I do think that it has the potential to impact recruitment, not because there's any challenge to finding highly skilled, qualified folks from underrepresented groups without being able to consider things like race and ethnicity, but because as one thing that happened in California when they stopped using race-conscious admissions was they saw that there wasn't a decrease in students who were applying to UC schools. There was a shift in where they were applying. So folks from underrepresented groups were less likely to apply to what folks might think of as the more competitive schools like UCLA and Berkeley. People were still going to college. They just sort of shifted because, and I mean, perhaps there was a perception that they would be sort of less valued or not appropriately valued at places that were seen as more elitist. So that's my concern about how it might affect particularly a place like Johns Hopkins. But I think for me, that made my job a little more challenging and more important during the recruitment season this year to make sure that we were really making it clear that we value inclusive excellence here at Johns Hopkins, that we have a long track record valuing inclusive excellence, that folks from underrepresented groups are welcome here, and that we have resources to support their success.
Wow, Andrea, that was an excellent presentation, and the work you're doing is really terrific and really valuable. Thanks so much for making this fantastic contribution to our institution. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.